All right, guys. So today, for just a few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about different typefaces and typography. Obviously, we've discovered that typography is a great way to add visual interest to our pieces, all the work that we're doing for clients or for our class projects. Obviously, when we talk about branding, we need to be consistent. We've talked about consistency in our design. So for branding for a company or for a certain product line, we need to be consistent in the type of fonts that we use. You guys have studied a whole lot about typography and how different types of typography gives different moods. So obviously, there's a good opportunity as a designer. You'll see that many designers are font and typography lovers, and we kind of create our own collection of our most loved fonts. We also sometimes wrinkle up our noses to certain fonts that are being used, almost overused by either companies or those who aren't as into design maybe as we are. So I wanted to do just a little bit of a cover on different typography options so that you guys have a chance to see how to select and download fonts from online, talk about a little bit about different types of licensing with fonts and how to keep track of those things, and then also how to install fonts on your computer so that they should show up in your Adobe programs and in your word processing software. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that you can see what we're working on today. Right now, I am inside of Font Squirrel. Font Squirrel is probably my #1 resource for commercial-free fonts. It is basically a font database. And commercial-free essentially means that they are free for use, meaning that you can't sell them or redistribute them or claim them as your own, but that you are definitely welcome to use them in client projects where you receive pay. So if it's something as a commercial use, obviously then you know that it is available for you to use. Now, fair use means that you have either acquired the license or that it's available on the internet for anyone to use. So the biggest thing that I can tell you is that every single designer and every website that you look at for fonts may have a little bit different legalese when it comes to the type of licenses that you're going to be able to receive for the fonts. Obviously, the fonts that are a little bit less used are those that are more expensive, and there are some fonts out there that are worth quite a bit of money. So in a minute, I'll talk to you about fonts that are overused, but I wanted to show you Font Squirrel because I feel like it's a great resource. In the notes for this week, I have also included other couple of sites that I use frequently that seem to be recommended by a lot of instructors or graphic designers that have quite a few fonts on them. The best thing that I can say is to select fonts wisely, and then to keep a place on your computer where you keep the OTF or the TTF files, so that I actually have a folder that says fonts, and then I divide it into commercial use, things I've paid for. I also keep the licenses. If I've paid for a font, I download the license and include it in a licenses folder that's held within my typography folder, so that whenever I need to source the font to a client or send them a link to where they can purchase the font and have them use it in their own branding materials, or if I do all their marketing, then I keep track of the fact that I own those fonts, and then I make sure that they have the rights to use them in the ways that we're using them. So licensing of fonts can be a whole nother topic, but today I just wanted to show Font Squirrel. Font Squirrel's big claim to fame is 100% free for commercial use. Sometimes they will send you to outside websites to download fonts, and if that's the case, make sure you read the licensing. They are just a database, so they're not, they have checked them out and tried to validate that every font is free for commercial use, but I strongly recommend that you double check as well. So today I just happen to be on the hot tab for the hottest fonts that happen to be on Font Squirrel right now. One of the fonts that I just recently downloaded for a client project is this Playfair Display. It's a really great font, and I decided it would look really good for a big title on one of their business cards, and then also across some of their marketing materials. So the easiest way to do this, you can click in, and lots of font sites, you guys are probably really familiar with this. They'll show you all the different options. I love Font Squirrel because it gives you a test drive option, so I can type in whatever I would like to see if it kind of looks well with the type of headings or things that I'm doing. The specimens are a great place to look also if you're just going to look. I usually go in and just make sure that there isn't any crazy characters that may not look great, things that stand out to me. If you've got the tails on certain letters that just don't seem to be equal with each other, then it may not be such a great font to use. But almost all the fonts I've seen on Font Squirrel are excellent options. So essentially all I do is click into it and hit this download button. You could definitely just go through. There's a download button on each one of these. So you'd hit one of those and wait for it to download. And once that happens, I go down into my Finder file. I work on a Mac, However, I think it's pretty much the same for a PC. Once that is downloaded, my Playfair display is now still downloading, but earlier today for a client, I went ahead and downloaded a font called Little Days. So, and I haven't uploaded it yet. So what you'll do is just go to your downloads folder. My Macs usually unzip files, but you may find a zip file if you have a PC. You'll need to double click and make sure that that zip file is unzipped. And then you'll have an open folder like this. You can see the Little Days file is highlighted, and I've got 3 TTF fonts. So those are true type fonts. I actually don't want the Little Daisy font, but I do want to do Little Days alt and just plain Little Days. Some fonts will have alternate characters, like so when you're pairing letters like 2 T's or a T and an H, they may have different swirls or swooshes that go together or that look a little bit different than if you just typed T and H on their own. So I'm going to go ahead and just highlight Little Days, and then I'm going to double click on that, and you'll notice over here in the top left hand corner of my screen, it pops up basically, you know, the numeral values and then the lowercase and uppercase of the font. Then I just hit click install font, and it pops up into in Mac it's a font reader. It's basically your font book. So here you might see that there's some problems. This one does have one. The reason that it's telling me that there's a caution is because I've already installed it. But you just click install and then it would be available. Now sometimes, every once in a while, when you go into Photoshop, you will find that it doesn't convert. So when I did this font earlier, I had to basically refresh Photoshop to make sure that it was in. But you can go just double check. I went in here. And Little Days is in there. Earlier I added the Playfair. So I'll see if Playfair is in there right now. And you can see that it will change to Playfair. So you just go back in and check. Most of the time it just automatically refreshes within your open Adobe Programs. But if it doesn't, I strongly recommend going through and just closing down your program and make sure you save all your files, but then close down your program and reopen. And then you should be able to see those refresh fonts. So hopefully that helps a little bit if you are not familiar with how to upload fonts. Just a few words about fonts. Microsoft is great to have basically the standard fonts that come. If you work in Canva or PicMonkey, you'll probably see that there's some standard fonts and some extra fonts in there. But I wanted to cover just a few things that for me as a designer, and I think for most designers in general, there are some fonts that are overused. And so I'll share this link in the notes after this video, but this is a blogger and a graphic designer, and she has some trendy fonts that you see popping up everywhere. And instead of using these that are almost too common now, to go ahead and use some different options. And she's got a bunch of different. Medina Script is something that you see pop up over the internet everywhere. Tuesday Script and Money are great fonts as well, and aren't quite as overused, which means that your branding and your design is going to be a little bit fresher and a little bit more eye-catching. Montserrat is something that I use constantly, and there's a bazillion different weights of it, so that's one I'd recommend for sure. But this is something to think through. If you get on Pinterest and you look for basically some different ideas, if you type in fonts or overused fonts or most popular script fonts, you'll pull up a lot of different pins from bloggers and designers, and then you'll have the opportunity to basically see what things really work well, what things don't work so well, and then also the basic fonts that come, you know, right out of package with your word processing software that people say really not to use. Obviously, Times New Roman and Arial are a little bit boring because they've been around for a long time. So keep that in mind as you work on your projects. I know for one of the things I'm looking at as I see you submit your projects, I'm looking for grading. I'm looking to see if you're using creativity in the type of fonts you're using, if you're taking into consideration the rules of typography and design, and if you're using the different typography to catch my attention, to create consistency in the piece, and to create an attractive, eye-catching element to your design. So keep that in mind. I hope that helps. If you have questions about fonts or are looking for some other great places, check out the links that I've included, and hopefully that will make things a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun as you design on your projects.